What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Just want to do a little Steelers Jags preview night before the game. Really big game for the Steelers coming up. I think it's going to be a really good test to see kind of where they are right now. I look at Jacksonville as one of the more talented teams in the AFC, so it'll be interesting to see how they stack up. Just want to kind of roll through the injuries real quick, and then we'll kind of go over what the Jags have to offer kind of on both sides of the ball, and then we'll talk about kind of the matchup itself. But from an injury standpoint, for the Steelers, really only a couple questionable guys. The DB room a little banged up. Levi Wallace, Joey Porter Jr. both questionable. I anticipate that both of those guys are going to play, especially Porter, who already kind of told the media that he was going to be good with that calf injury. James Pierre was a DNP on Friday, and that kind of led to Luke Barku and Darius Rush telling the media that they took some first team reps. I don't know what that necessarily means. Maybe just getting those guys kind of ready to roll just in the event that one of the starters kind of goes down during the game or something like that. But I do think Rush is probably going to get a helmet this week, especially if Pierre can't go. We may not see him on defense unless Wallace struggles again, like he did a little bit last week. But Rush is a good special teamer. Had like 15 special teams tackles at South Carolina. So he's a guy that I think can contribute there, even if he doesn't play a lot on defense. But be nice to see him get on the field if that's what transpires. Just kind of going to the Jags side. They got a bunch of guys listed questionable, but everybody was a limited participant in practice really all week. Cisco, their star safety, Trevor Lawrence, both those guys I anticipate playing. Some injuries on the O-line, Walker Little, Brandon Sheriff dealing with some lower body stuff. I anticipate those guys playing as well. The big question mark is going to be Tyson Campbell, who's working his way back from a hamstring injury. He wasn't in the lineup last week. They were kind of forced to play some other guys at the corner position. Hamstrings are tricky, limited participant all week. I think he's probably going to try to go, but they did elevate somebody from the practice squad at the corner spot. So maybe that's not a great sign that he'll be back this week. But Campbell's definitely a guy that Jacksonville wants to get back out there, probably the guy on their team that matches up the best with George Pickens. So that'll be interesting to watch. Just kind of go over some stuff for Jacksonville. We'll start on the defensive side of the ball just because I feel like the offense gets talked about a lot and has gotten a lot of run over the course of the week. But the Jags defense, man, it's pretty solid defense. Not gonna lie to you guys. I've actually been pleasantly surprised when I've watched the Jags so far this season. They've got a decent amount of talent. I know that there's been some back and forth between George Pickens and some of their defensive backs this week. I think that's only going to make the battle kind of more interesting on Sunday to see how those matchups kind of play out. Just kind of going front to back, the big guy that you got to watch, Josh Allen. He's really a one-man show in terms of their pass rush. The Jags don't have a lot of guys up front, to be honest with you, that really scare you a ton. But Allen's really the one guy that does it. He's double-digit pressure game against New Orleans last week, top 10 in sacks, pressures, quarterback hits, all that stuff. He only rushes on the right side, so that'll be Dan Moore's side. He's going to get a chance to, go back-to-back solid weeks in pass pro. Allen does a lot of different stuff, swipes, long arms. He prefers, speed to power, has burst to him as well. So that's the one guy that they have to shut down in terms of pass rush. Trayvon Walker on the other side still coming along a little slow. And then, the interior guys are more just run stoppers. But really, again, Josh Allen, the one guy that they absolutely have to kind of shut down. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see what Jacksonville does from a blitz perspective. Jacksonville has a top 10 blitz rate. They blitz a lot on third and long, so that's something to definitely watch for. You'll see some simulated pressures, some creepers, some things that have given Pittsburgh a little bit of trouble, so keep an eye on that. The Steelers need to do what they did last week, run the ball efficiently, which is not always easy against some of these big bodies that Jacksonville has up front. But they need to stay out of those third and longs because I think that's really where they can get in some trouble. You look at some stats, Jags, 7th in EPA per play, 6th in success rate, top 10 in passing success rate, passing EPA. Rushing success rate, they're third, so they do a good job of keeping teams in those third and long situations. So it's really going to be an interesting kind of styles matchup on that side of the ball. Jacksonville does have some interesting linebackers. Devin Lloyd, they're using him a little bit on the edge, really long. Both their linebackers are really around the ball a lot. So tackling machines, really long in terms of being in the middle of the field. In the secondary, Darius Williams plays a lot better when he's lined up outside in terms of versus in the slot. He's a solid. I'd call him like a baseline starter type. Tyson Campbell's a good player. Physical, can play at the line of scrimmage. They play a lot of cover three, a lot of single high stuff. They use Cisco as kind of the center fielder type. He's a little bit like Minka in the fact that he will take some gambles, some calculated risks, if you will, but also really smart player. Does a good job keeping the lid on stuff in the deep middle part of the field. Definitely a guy that you have to make sure that you're careful on where he's at and where he's lined up because he's a takeaway machine. So very opportunistic player. They've came away with a decent amount of receptions. Rayshon Jenkins playing some decent ball too. So be interesting to see. I think the Steelers do have some advantages on the opposite side of the ball. Especially if Campbell does not play, I think the Steelers are going to have some advantages on the outside. Like I said, they play a lot of single high. The Steelers did a really nice job last week, and I think have done a decent job over the past couple of weeks getting their playmakers isolated opportunities. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. I really don't think there's a lot of teams on the schedule that are going to have corners that I really think that are going to be able to completely neutralize those two guys. So the Steelers are going to be able to take advantage of those. It's really just a two-man passing attack right now. A lot of the other guys, Allen Robinson, Connor Hayward, not really involved in the passing game. The Jags have allowed a ton of receptions to running backs this year. Alvin Kamara last week had double-digit running receptions from the running back spot. We'll see if that trickles down to Najee Harris. They haven't thrown him the ball very much this season. Maybe some Jalen Warren touches. I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's kind of what you need to know about the Jags defense. Really cover three heavy. Like I said, Gus Bradley, that's almost the type of defense that you're going to see in terms of just how cover three heavy they are. I think second in the NFL in terms of usage for that. So moving on to the opposite side of the ball, Trevor Lawrence, he's obviously one of the hot topics, on social media. It seems like every week, but rising star at the quarterback position. Just some of my notes from studying the Jags offense over the summer. Lawrence, cannon for an arm, really, really good arm strength, excellent touch, more creative than you would assume, or I assumed he was coming out of college. Does some really nifty stuff in the pocket just in terms of how quick he can maneuver, navigate through pressure. He is a risk taker. He will thread some tight window throws. You'll see him. He's starting to incorporate some shoulder fakes, some pump fakes, things like that. That's kind of when you know that quarterbacks are starting to kind of get it. But their offensive line is average at best, really. They're playing some young guys. They got Anton Harrison, first round pick, Walker Little. Brandon Sheriff's been a good player for a really long time. Luke Fortner's kind of popped on film for me a little bit when I've studied their offense this year. Good athlete, can kind of get out in space, second, third level type of guy. The receivers, really interesting group to me. One of the problems in Trevor's rookie year where he really struggled was just they didn't have enough playmakers. They didn't have enough last year, but they kind of made it work. But every year they've kind of added an extra piece. So, really starts, Calvin Ridley made the big move for him. Ridley's kind of being used as that prototypical X receiver, just out on the boundary, good against press, still has pretty good speed, even though he missed a year of football from the gambling thing. But good stop and start ability, can get vertical. They'll throw him some shots down the sideline. He's had a weird season, probably not as productive as I thought he would be, but they're using him a little bit weird, maybe not taking full advantage of his route running capabilities. But, him and Lawrence are developing a connection. Christian Kirk, their number one receiver last year, primarily a slot guy. Definitely somebody you need to watch just in terms of, Patrick Peterson's playing a little bit more in the slot. Is he going to be able to slow down Kirk? This is one of my bigger questions about moving Peterson to the slot kind of full time, which we kind of anticipate happening now, is he going to be quick enough to kind of deal with some of these shiftier guys? You saw late in the game against the Saints, Kirk put that away with a long touchdown. He ran a little juke route over the middle of the field. He's a guy that can work underneath in the middle. They throw it to him against zone coverage. He's really good at finding soft spots. He's a good player. Evan Ingram is, he's been a really solid player for them as well. They use Ingram in an interesting way. A lot of yards after catch from him. One of the better tight ends in the league in terms of getting additional yards after the grab. They'll throw him screens. They throw him, little drag routes, try to get him the ball in space. And then Jamal Agnew's kind of the gadget type player. Whenever he's in the game, the Steelers definitely have to pay attention to where he's at because they do some interesting stuff and try to get him the ball in space. He's their punt returner, really good player on special teams. Is definitely a threat to take the ball to the house really anytime he touches the ball. Travis Etienne, obviously come from the same draft class as Najee Harris. Big play threat, top 5 in explosive runs, touchdowns, missed tackles for us. He's had a really good year. One thing that's interesting about the Jags is they haven't been able to create a ton of splash plays in the passing game. They have been able to create some splash plays in the run game. ETN and some Trevor Lawrence scrambles. That's one thing that I'm a little bit worried about from the Steelers' perspective. They've given up some long runs. You think back to Christian McCaffrey, Jerome Ford, busting some long runs early in the season. This is one of those games where I feel like, in order to keep this thing close, they got to make sure they keep the lid on things. Going to be really important for the secondary to tackle. If ETN, really good contact balance, if he gets to the second and third levels, the Steelers secondary is not overly fast. So have to make sure you get him on the ground before he gets there. And then if he does get into the secondary, have to make sure the first guy tackles him. Because if not, that's a 35, 40-yard gain. Wrote about that on SteelersNow.com. If y'all want like a more in-depth kind of scouting report on ETN and their run game, y'all can go check that out. But yeah, I mean, the Jags offense has been a little bit disappointing just in terms of the metrics. They're right around middle of the pack in terms of most of the important metrics. I think a lot of people, including myself, had higher expectations for this group, but it feels just really weird. They kind of almost feel like Baltimore-ish in the way that like you watch them on film and they're a lot more impressive than their numbers are. Had some weird kind of games where they've had some touchdowns dropped or uh, costly turnovers in the red zone. That's one of the things that you can actually really get after Jacksonville on. Trevor's taken good care of the football in terms of not throwing picks, but they fumble the ball a ton. He fumbles the ball a ton. He can be a little bit loose with the football. He does a good job kind of maneuvering around pressure, but in terms of just ball security, not the greatest. Sometimes will let his offhand off the ball prematurely, won't sense some stuff, and he's turned the ball over in the red zone. So that's been costly to some of their advanced metrics. I think they lead the NFL with 15 fumbles on the ground already this season. Next highest is 13. So that's definitely an area. If the Steelers are going to win, we talk about this really every week. They're going to need a couple turnovers from the defense. That's just kind of the MO. When the defense forces turnovers and they can muddy this thing up and make it look really ugly, the Steelers typically are able to keep it close in the fourth quarter, and then they score just enough points to pull out the victory. But I will just reiterate what I was saying. Just the Jacksonville offense, when I watch it on tape, it doesn't feel smooth right now, but it does feel like they're maybe on the brink of like a breakout game. They've had some 30-point games this season. Maybe not like a game where they've put it together for all 4 quarters. But, they do have the ability they have enough talent on the offensive end, I'll say that, to put up points in a bunch. And that's definitely something that, Pittsburgh's going to have to come out ready to play. They're at home, so I anticipate they'll do that. But this is one of those, games where, if they can come out really hot and it gets 14-0, 10-0, something like that, those are not situations that fit to what the Steelers are trying to do, especially to how slow their offense typically starts. They need to try to keep this one close until the second half, kind of like what they did last week. So be interesting styles game on Sunday. I don't really have a prediction other than the fact that like every Steeler game really feels like the same to me right now. They either get the doors blown off of them, a la, San Francisco or something like that, or even Houston, where they kind of got the doors blown off them, even though that one was a little bit closer in the second half than maybe the final score would indicate, or the Steelers are going to win a close game. And I think that the Jags, like I said, some of their turnover stuff, particularly putting the ball on the ground, gives me hope that the Steelers are going to be able to create enough turnovers to keep this thing close. But the Steelers offense, played really well in the second half. Kenny Pickett had one of his best games of the season. I think there are some underlying matchup type stuff that they could take advantage of. Like I said, a lot of single high. They're going to be singled up on the outside. Anticipate you'll see some Deontay Johnson comebacks, some George Pickens shots as well, especially when they get those one-on-one chances. So also really interested to see if the Steelers can keep up the run game stuff. I did the Jalen Warren video on the channel. If you haven't looked at it, you can go watch that. Broke down his touchdown run from last week. But the Steelers, the only team in the NFL last week, over 50% rushing success rate. So I'm really interested to see because the Jags defense has done a really good job against the run this year. I'm interested to see if the Steelers can find a way to kind of penetrate some of their interior fronts and things like that. They'll play some 3 down stuff, they play some 4 down stuff, odd, even. They mix things up. They, like I said, most of their guys up front are really better against the run. Trayvon Walker, their interior guys. Those guys are really on the field to kind of take care of that stuff. So the Steelers, they need to play well on defense. They want to be multidimensional on offense. We'll see if they're able to do that. But yeah, just wanted to get some quick thoughts out there. Kind of ran a little bit longer than I anticipated, but hopefully that's some good info, some things for you guys to watch tomorrow leading into the game. And then, next week, now that I'm home from the hospital after the birth of my son, I will be able to hopefully have a normal week next week in terms of workload. Hopefully, be able to get a couple film rooms up on the channel based on whatever happens on Sunday. So, short week. I'll be back to do a recap of Steelers Jags after the game. I don't know if I'll go live on the channel or if I'll just drop one of these types of videos. Y'all can let me know which one y'all would prefer. And depending on what's going on around my house or when I can get around to recording it, I'll get that stuff to you guys. Of course, all my written work can be found at steelersnow.com. And like I said, I'll try to get to 1 or 2 film room type videos before Steelers Titans kicks off on Thursday. Short weeks are always a little bit tough, but really excited about, a lot of Steelers football, 2 games in 4 days. Terrible for the players, but good for us, from an entertainment perspective. So hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hopefully the Steelers are able to pull out a dub for you guys tomorrow. And I will check you guys next time. Peace and love.